Good evening and welcome to the first episode of Big Fat Arts, a program focusing on the gay and lesbian art scene in Melbourne. We'll be talking to gay and lesbian artists, looking at gay and lesbian art, and generally poking our bent lens into anything of interest to the gay and lesbian community in the art scene generally. Now tonight my very special guest is no stranger to bent TV audiences, the charming, beautiful and breathtakingly talented Vivienne Ward. Good evening, Vivienne.
Oh, Chris, I love it when you tell the truth.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're so talented at it.
That's true. Now, a lot of our Bent TV viewers will know you as, of course, the presenter of Bent Vent, but they may not know that you have an extracurricular career as a photographer.
That's true. I do have a little sideline going there in photography.
Yeah, and it's a bit more than a sideline because, of course, your pictures go into the MSO club pages and things like that.
That's right. I've been working for MSO for about a year now.
Yeah, and you also work as, or do work as an art photographer.
I do. I do a lot of freelance work, but I also do a lot of personal work as well for myself to express the way I feel about things.
Yeah, now how did you get started in photography?
Well, it was all quite strange. I was given a camera as a gift for Christmas by a partner a few years ago because they thought I was bored and needed something to keep me occupied. And I took to it like a duck to water, and that was it. I was hooked. And before I knew it, I was buying camera equipment above clothing, which was a big shock to my system.
How does photography work as an art form? What goes into creating a work of art in photography?
Well, a work of art really, in any form of the sense of art, is about an expression. So with photography, it really isn't any different to that. And for me, it's about my expression. I found that photography was really good for me when I was coming out because I really wasn't comfortable coming out, but when I had the camera, it made everything a lot easier. I could express how I was feeling and explore new avenues through my lens, and at times I was able to use it as a voyeuristic tool too, which kind of helped.
Do you work in a studio or do you mainly work outside?
Well, I do a combination of both. I work in studio and out. Out of a studio can be out my front door. It really can be as easy as that, whereas it can be a full location shoot that can take a lot of time and detail. But I mean, your studio is with you all the time as long as you've got a camera in your hand, basically.
Oh, yes, I see that, yeah. Now, a lot of people will look at photographic works of art and say, well, you know, anybody can do that. Now, there's a lot more to it than just pointing the camera and
well, you're talking about a snapshot there, and a snapshot is really about recording a moment in time. I mean, that's what you do. Every time you press down on a shutter release button, you're freezing something there. A 30th of a second usually is what you're doing. But when you're doing a photographic piece of art, it's not about freezing a moment in time. It's really about freezing a thought or freezing an expression. And that exposure can be hours long rather than seconds long, so you can really encompass a lot into it.
What goes into, when you're developing the photograph, there's a lot of the art can happen in that period.
Well, that's right. I mean, after the shutter's been released, that's only a third really of the work done. I mean, for me, most of my work is black and white that I do as far as art is concerned, and that really is all left up to the development of film, the development of your prints, the way you present your prints. All of those things go into making excuse me, your print complete or your piece of art complete.
Have you studied formally anywhere?
I have. I've been studying at a formal institution for the past 3 years part-time.
What sort of qualification do you get, or can you get in photography?
Well, you can, like any form of education, you can go right up and get your master's or your PhD in photography in all the different areas of photography, from fine art to photojournalism to commercial. And commercial is things like fashion through to advertising through to weddings, but for me it is fine art, so you really can. The sky's the limit as far as you can go, but with photography you never stop studying. It doesn't stop when you leave the classroom. There's always something new and exciting to explore, whether it be in your preparation or whether it be in your development.
Do you find that the work you do in your club, in clubbing, it informs your artwork?
Well, it does, because a lot of what I see will inspire me for other work. A thought that somebody else has had will give me an idea of how I'd like to do something. A lot of the costumes we see out on the scene, for instance, really gives me a lot of ideas. The colour and movement gives me ideas as well.
Yeah. What about the cost?
Well, it can be very expensive. Photography, like most art forms, is very expensive, and I have many cameras and enlargers and lighting, and it all makes up a tremendous cost. And chemicals themselves are not cheap. Like, I make all my own chemicals. I don't buy pre-bottled chemicals and develop my prints that way. I actually make them from scratch. So some of the powders and things you put in, not only are they toxic, but they're very costly. But you don't do it for money, you do it for love. Like any art, you have to do it for love.
Yeah. Well, let's have a look at some of the works you've brought in. Now, these ones down here, explain what's going on in those.
Well, this one's called Transfusion, and I've always been quite interested in folklore and vampiric folklore. It goes back to my childhood when I was allowed to watch my first scary movie, which was a vampire. And this is one of my closest friends in my life, and Transfusion came about because she's transgender, and the fusion of the blood. So reaching out for the victim and the biting of the teeth are very synonymous with vampires, and they've sort of got that mysterious dark edge, especially this one. I mean, really, with photography, a lot's what you leave out as opposed to what you put in as well.
Right. Now, I've noticed you've tinted those. Are those hand tinted?
They are.
Right.
Anything that's done to these prints, I have done it myself. So this is painstaking painting for me, because I'm certainly no painter. My stick figures are androgynous, so it does take me quite a bit of work when I do my hand painting.
Yeah. Can you do that kind of tinting or colouring in the development process? Or does it
no, but the tones of the print you do in the development process. But when it comes to actually selective colouring, you actually have to do that by hand, or now digitally as well. But I still prefer the old-fashioned techniques of doing it by hand.
Right. Let's have a look at some of the other ones you've got.
Well, this one's slightly coloured as well. It's still a monochromatic print, but it was the colours in this were actually done in the darkroom, but it's still monochromatic. You can change the colour of the print in the darkroom as long as it's still monochromatic. So I could have done this in bright red or bright blue, purple, yellow, your traditional sepia tones. This has sort of just got a slightly warmy, pinky tone to it. But this was really, for me, an expression about coming out, this series here, which is called Nereids, and Nereids are about sea mermaid kind of creatures. So it was really special for me to be able to do this.
And I believe you're your own model.
Well, I was actually. This is me and somebody that was very important in my life at the time. So we had a very pleasant but cold day on a public beach during these particular pictures.
Oh yeah, and what about the other series?
Okay, we've got a couple of other series here as well. This is from a series called Stolen Innocence, and it's about child abuse and about religion, because a lot of that does go on with religion, unfortunately, as we all have heard with the Catholic Church. So I chose to do a lot of the shooting for this in a cemetery and used a lot of very Christian symbolicism. For instance, with this one we have a little tiny crown of thorns on dead Dolly Crucified's head, and of course Dolly hanging from a crucifix. But it's all about looking to, for instance, this one, that was just a shadow of a cross, so it would become appropriate for the particular picture at the time.
Yeah, so there's a combination of choosing what is a specific moment in time and then adding something to it, which makes the form of art.
I mean, if I had just taken the shadow of the cross, it really wouldn't have been anything, or taking the teddy there by itself wouldn't have been anything either. It wouldn't have said anything, but by overshadowing a cross on it, you really have to question what's going on. And that's what it's all about when you're talking about art, is questioning what's going on in the piece that you're looking at.
That's true. What about these other ones that you've got?
Well, this particular series is very special to me. This is called Seraphic Dawn. Now, this is a place in the country where I grew up, and this particular lake I used to spend a lot of time at growing up, and it always used to haunt me. It was one of those places I expected to see the creature from the Black Lagoon crawl out of. So what I was trying to show in these pictures was that sense of ear, and at 5:30 on a very cold morning, I went out and took some photos of the sky and the murky water and the reeds that surrounded it. So.
All right. Now, how seriously is photography taken as an art form by the art world? It didn't used to be, I know that.
No, well, photography's only been around for a bit over 150 years, and it was a science for a long time, and it was all about chemistry. A lot of people got very sick from photography, from the chemistry involved as well, and you still can if you're not careful. So it wasn't until around the turn of the century that people started to fight for it as an art form in its own right, because it was still being developed. And it wasn't until around the 40s or 50s that it really started to be taken seriously. But there are those who still suggest that photography isn't an art form today. But that general idea has gone by the wayside now. I mean, we've seen some great artists come through the years who've been able to express some amazing things, as we will see along with computer generation in the years to follow.
Yeah, well, it certainly seems to be going that way, yes. Well, thank you very much, Vivienne.
Thank you.
That was fascinating. Now we've got a bit of a what's on in Melbourne. There's a few things of interest to the gay and lesbian community that are happening over the coming couple of weeks. The Friends of Barbara, the wonderfly talented Luke Gallagher and Nigel, now I'm not sure about this one, Breheen, I think is his name. It's called A Happening at the Havana. It's at the Havana Club from the 16th and 17th of August at 8 p.m. And they're two very talented young men, so pop along and see that one. Third World Blues is a play by David Williamson, one of his early ones. That's happening at the Alexander Theatre in Clayton on from the 18th of August to the 22nd of August, so it's a fairly short season. The Troubles Come Home is at La Mama till August the 23rd. It's a play about the Troubles in Ireland, of course. Now in the film world, we've got The Dead Letter Office. It's by John Ruane, who did Death in Brunswick. That opens on the 20th of August. Head On, of course, which is adapted from the novel Loaded by Christos Tsiolkas. That's on general release at the moment. Of course, that's got Alex Dimitriadis in it. Welcome to Whoop Whoop, which is by Stephen Elliott, who was the director of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. That's also on general release. And we've got The Opposite of Sex by the director Don Roos. Now that's on general release as well. That one particularly deals with questions of sex and sexuality and gender and swapping boyfriends for girlfriends and all that kind of thing. It's got two very cute young men in it as well. So thank you for watching Big Fat Arts, and join us next week for another episode. Good night.